Hey everybody, Heavy Riff Beer here, and I want to show you guys how I make mead at home. What you see in front of me is everything that I'm going to need for the batch today. So I've got 12 pounds of Missouri wildflower honey, that's equivalent to 1 gallon. I have 5 grams of Mead K, that's a yeast nutrient. I've got a funnel, sanitized carboy. I've got my yeast, which is the Y yeast dry mead yeast. I also have an oxygen stone and an oxygen tank. This will be a relatively high gravity, and so I want to inject a lot of O2 into the must before fermentation begins. And I've gone ahead and used Mead K as my yeast nutrient. Mead is made from honey, and honey must doesn't contain a lot of the essentials that yeast need for proper reproduction. Things such as diammonium phosphate, magnesium, niacin, all of those are in the Mead K and will help boost the yeast along, allow them to mature and go ahead and reproduce at a much faster rate. The metabolic activity will be faster, and allow the fermentation to occur much better than if it was a deficient must itself. So I'm going to set this aside, and as a note, everything here has been sanitized. I use Star San for my sanitizing, and it's a no-rinse sanitizer, and don't fear the foam. I've gone ahead and put 1 gallon of boiled, cooled, filtered water into my carboy. You can see a little bit of the Star San foam just kind of riding on top there. Since this is a 5-gallon batch, I've got 1 gallon of honey, and I'll use 4 parts water of equal, so we have 4 gallons of water total. My water was taken from my filter. It was then boiled and has been cooled in sanitized jugs. So in my case, I just happen to have milk jugs, so they were cleaned out, sanitized, and then the boiled and cooled water went into the jugs, and they are now sitting in my refrigerator or my kegerator here, so that when we go ahead and top everything up, we should hit pretty close to fermentation temperatures. That said, my honey I know is pasteurized, so I'm not worried about having to boil it to kill off any pathogens that might be in there. Alternatively, if you use a honey that is much more raw, you can bring it up to pasteurization up to 160 to 170 degrees for 20 minutes to a half hour. You can boil it if you want to, and if you've got a really, really raw honey, boiling it will allow you to get all the kind of critter parts and bee legs and things like that. They'll float to the surface, and you can skim them and skim the foam off the top, and then you can cool it and go ahead and put it in your fermenter and get your fermentation underway. There is a little bit of debate back and forth on boiling honey, as many experienced mead makers say that blows off a lot of the delicate aromatics, especially if you have a lighter flavored honey. In my case, I do. This is just Missouri wildflower honey. It is not a particularly strong honey in its intensity. It's a very flavorful honey, but I'm worried if I were to boil it and cool it down like I would do a beer, that I would really kind of take a lot of the aromatic qualities from the honey, and they would blow off during the boil. So I've gone about it this route. I'm not saying it's the best route or the only route. What works for you is going to be the best thing, and definitely give mead a try. I'm using Y yeast as opposed to another wine yeast. You can use Lalvin, or you can use Red Star. I've done meads with D47, which is a Lalvin product that makes a semi-sweet mead, and turns out fantastic. As a matter of fact, that's what I'm drinking right now. This is a semi-sweet Pyman, which is an alternate version of a mead. This was also fermented with Gewürztraminer grape juice. And so it's got a lot of grape character, it's got a lot of nice honey character. The honey I used was an orange blossom honey, and so it's got a little citric quality. Very refreshing, very wine-like, but at the same time maintains a lot of that unique honey sweetness. So mead's definitely a drink that's worth doing. It's been around as long as beer's been made, and some folks who are into the history of drinks and beverages believe that honey may actually be a little bit older than beer itself, simply due to nature allowing honey to ferment a little bit easier. And all you needed is honey, some sort of a bucket, and a little water. Rain or something to fall into the bucket and start fermenting. Someone decided to drink it, tasted great. Along the same lines from what they say how beer was made, but some historians believe that because honey is so much easier to make and requires so much less of a chemical sort of reaction or understanding to make the drink, that it probably happened first. So now that we've got a gallon of water in our carboy, I'm going to set this down here. I've got my sanitized funnel. I'm going to go ahead and give it a quick spray. I over-sanitize everything, and I don't think that's a flaw. I think that's just something that makes for good beer, good wine, or good mead, just good fermentation habits. I'm going to stick it in the top there. I'm going to pull my honey out. I've got it sitting in some 160-degree water just to soften it up. This honey is very thick. Take the cap off there, and I'm just going to pour it straight on in. Pours pretty slowly. And what I'm going to do to rinse this jar out is actually take a gallon of the water that I have in my fridge, put some in there, shake it up really, really well before we dump it in. That way we get all of the honey that's kind of caked onto the sides. This mead will come in around 1076 original gravity. It's a pretty standard honey to water ratio. I've made many honeys with this, or many meads with this particular honey, and while I will go ahead and take a gravity reading because I do like to chart fermentation, I know that this mead will pretty much hit dead on around 1076. Alright, so we got just a little dripping now. Let's turn that up there. One gallon of boiled, filtered, cooled water. If you're wondering, the yeast nutrient does not have to be boiled. It can just go straight in. There are some mead makers who follow the world of wine and they do staggered yeast nutrient additions. So they use a portion of the yeast nutrient now, and they use a portion of it later. It's going to give this a really good shake. All that sugar out of there. Right. I actually broke the cap. Smells fantastic. This honey's been around a little bit, so some did crystallize to the bottom. Not worried about it. We'll go ahead and just let those dump on in. Honey does that when it sits for a little while. I've had this this particular jug for a little bit. You know, life happens and you just don't get around to making things, you know, when you think you will. I'm going to go ahead and take my 5 grams of Mead K. Toss it on in. It's time to start adding the rest of our water. There we go. So now we've got 3 gallons total in our fermenter. We have 1 gallon already in the carboy. We had a gallon now of honey, and we've added another gallon of water. Have a sip. Oh man, so good. If any of you guys are, you know, new to fermentation at all, mead is so easy to make, and you don't absolutely have to have all this stuff. I mean, you can basically just have a fermenter and honey and water, and try and source at least some winemaking yeast. I've had some meads that were made with bread yeast, baker's yeast, and there's some really old recipes out there for them. And while, you know, it makes alcohol, I would say if you're going to go through the trouble of buying really good honey and you're going to go through the effort, you know, a pack of wine yeast around here, which will do 6 gallons of wine or mead, is 99 cents. And it's pretty universally found. So yeah, definitely try and source that. Got another gallon of water.